with us because for whatever reason, test scores are out, but they're not releasing that information in certain states. We find out why on the other side. Go. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the South Star Classroom. That's David. That's Omar. And David, you had an interesting topic today, so I'm gonna let you get us all introduced and everything. But I'm ready to talk about this.
All right, will do. We missed you last week, Dr. Cole. We kicked off a rich discussion last week on this show around Hispanic, Latino heritage, and you know we're in the month. For some reason, we start in the middle of September.
I was going to ask
why we don't start in the first. Yeah, that's okay. But we're here. So basically, that was last week's show. We missed you, and so I decided for every show of Hispanic Heritage Month, my contribution to the community is going to be to wear a T-shirt that uplifts one of our heroes. And so today, we got.
Okay.
Do we know who that is? Anybody?
I would say Zapata, but I don't want to be wrong.
No, it's not.
It's not Zapata. I don't know.
His name is Chalino Sanchez.
See, you set me up, man. You set me up.
He's a Mexican. Was a Mexican singer. Moved to the United States and became a big folk hero, both here in the U.S. As well as in Mexico. And he was taken tragically as a result of possibly some of his life choices. You know, so.
See, yeah, look him up if you don't know Black trivia next episode and not tell y'all. And
just pop it on us, man. Yeah, we're good. We're ready. So excited about today's topic. We are going to be discussing. It's a relatively fresh topic. We've seen some of it kind of stirring on social media and in the news. But I think big news dropped in California this week, and so we're going to be talking about a couple of different states and what they are choosing to do or not to do with public information in the form of student performance test scores, right? That's the topic. That's the little teaser. But I wanted to have both of you check in since we haven't been together. It's been a week or two. And also to thank our listeners for tuning in to the South Star Classroom podcast. If you're on, make sure that you like and you share the stream. And if you're listening to us and you have a question or a comment, put it in the comments and we'll do our best to respond to it. It works best here when we have interactive shows with our listeners. So thank you for that. And so why don't we do check in? Let's see what's going on. We'll start with you, Dr. Cole. How have you been? What's happening in your neck of the woods?
I am good. I am at the finish line of a few different reports and an ebook called Stop Hustling Backwards. They're all coming out at the same time. So that's always fun. So doing some final edits on a bunch of different reports. So much that I lost track of time today. I still have food in front of me, which is weird. But I am happy to see y'all. I heard great things about the show. I heard there was a lot of learning. I am very interested in where Omar is. And blink twice if you need us to come get you. SEAL Team 6 will be on the way. You know what I mean? So I don't know what's going on, but you look like you are deep undercover. So, but how y'all doing, man? I missed y'all.
Oh, we missed you too, man. We missed you too. Good to hear from you. It was a fun show last week, man. It was a very deep dive. I am not deep undercover. I am back in Denver, over at my compadre's place in my comadre's office. So she's got like the stack of educator books that I think we've all read, Leveraging Leadership, Teach Like a Champion. Do these bring good memories or shudders from all the things that we've had to read over the years in terms of like our educational knowledge and so forth? No, man, I'm here just having a good weekend, still working remotely. We're now in week 10 of school. So the school year is off and running. And like we got essentially 400 new students this year on our East Side campus.
Wow.
So it's awesome. It's great growth, but it's like starting from scratch with culture and starting from scratch with students, and their needs are just extreme because it just becomes more and more evident as we recruit students just how extraordinarily ignored their needs are by the districts, by teachers who just don't understand how to teach emerging bilingual students. We're trying to get them integrated both into English while respecting the fact that they should maintain their native language in Spanish. And we've got a just big uphill climb to do this year with our students and get them into some pretty strong academic gains. So I bring this up because our data is back on the needs of our students, as we're going to talk about data today, and it is extreme. And it just makes me worry because I'm like, a lot of these 9th graders and 10th graders, what have the schools been doing for you the last 9-10 years of your academic life?
Yep.
And now it's on us. It's our accountability. We've got to make miracles happen.
Right. That's right. You're not responsible for you're not responsible for what's happened before. But it is definitely your responsibility to understand where your kids are, and then it's your responsibility to, set goals for them and help them, and along the growth trajectory. Not necessarily thinking about performance, but students can be coming in, like several years behind grade level on any given subject, and I think it's important work that you all are doing at the Leadership Academy in El Paso. Just paying attention to this stuff, right? Like this is just part of your work, unpacking it. And oftentimes it's the data can be pretty jarring to look at and pretty startling. But that's where you are and that's where your kids are. And so the idea is then like get to work, right?
That's a great segue. That was good,
Indeed.
David.
That was a great segue.
But you said that the data, he said, lean on the data. Yeah. Is everybody leaning on the data, David? Or is everybody taking it and putting it out there so we can all grow?
Yeah. So, okay, let's dive in.
Well, you can tell us how you're doing too, though, brother.
I'm doing good.
Yeah, man, we want to hear how you're doing, man. Come on, man.
I'm doing good, man. Everything's nice down here. We're heading into another heat wave. It's the beginning of fall. It's going to be 95 or something this weekend. So yeah, everything's so far so good.
The last day of summer here was like 89. The first day of fall here was like 68 degrees. I don't know how that worked out that way, but it did.
They're playing with the weather. That's how. Okay, we're not going to go into the conspiracies today.
Hey.
We're not that kind of podcast, man.
Well, we'll see when we get into our topic, because there's lots of chatter out there. Exactly. So 2 things I want to start out with. We're going to mainly talk about academic data today, math, English language arts, right? But we are also like putting on the table that's one piece of the puzzle. There are other data sources, attendance, school culture, survey data, and then you have all kinds of other academic data that schools are constantly collecting, right? What we're talking about today, and we're not discounting any of that, but what we're talking about today are the mandatory assessments that each public school has to give to their kids. It's kind of different in every state, but there's a form of a standardized test for every state. And students typically take these, they take them in the late spring. You want to kind of push them out, as far out as you can to help them prepare. But I think April or May is the window when these assessments are taken. And then it's a big waiting game. We used to package them up and put them in a box and ship them. And now it's all electronic. So you'd think it would be faster, but actually the turnaround time to get your school's data, whether you're a district or your own charter school, it can take months, right? And I know in California, August is generally the accepted window when a particular school or a district would get its own data. The state might embargo the data for a couple of weeks, and then in late August, September, they publish all of the data. It becomes public. So we're talking about, this is not individualized to particular students. This is a big data set. And what we're going to talk about is that a couple of states are withholding the big data set, and now it's kind of becoming a public information issue, right? Where people are demanding this data because it's a public school, it's a public entity, and the public has a right to see this information. Again, happening in different ways in different states. But that's what we're talking about. Academic information. These are assessments that students took last spring, and the public wants to know, and the public should know how students are doing, whether it's good or bad, right? Most schools get the data ahead of time, and they're able to use it and share it maybe if they want to. But we're in this weird limbo right now, at least in New York and California, where data has been shared with schools, and state governments are telling them you can share it if you want publicly, it's your data, but they are not sharing the larger data set publicly. So that's what we're talking about today.
Did they give rationale?
Yes, I think it's different in different places. I've done some reading into this. I think in California, what they are saying is that it's connected to, in California, we have the dashboard. And the dashboard shows academic performance. It shows English language development performance. It shows attendance, discipline, a host of other indicators, right? And what they are saying for some reason this year is they want to wait to release all the data until it's all ready to go, right? Now that pushes us, at least in California, out until sometime in the middle of November, right? You want to talk about conspiracy theories? We've got an election. We've got midterm elections in early November, and so I mean, I don't necessarily think this is a motivating factor. Maybe it is, but there are a lot of people that I respect that work in education and policy and reform, and they're kind of going right to that. They're like that. They don't want to share the data. It's going to look bad for for particular California elections, for Democrats. I don't know, but that's taking us back to this, political conspiracy theory. Of course, as Omar started out, a couple of minutes ago, if you are a school, you need that data so you can share it with your teachers, so you can share it with your families, so you can improve your practices. You can set goals for children. You have a back to school night, parent teacher conferences, like that state testing data should be part of the package that you give to families with other things. That's the best practice. But now, things are kind of escalating into the left wing, right wing wars. This California story has actually been picked up by a lot of the right wing folks on social media. We know some of them. And they're making it an immediate political issue. I don't know if it's a political issue. At best or at worst, maybe it's a failure of government, right? Nothing new. But that's what's happening in California. And I know also in New York, they're having a similar issue where data has been shared at the site level or district level, but not yet given out to the larger public. There are organizations that need this data so they can update their metric systems. And I mean, if you think about, if you're a parent looking for a school for next year, right? You're going to want to see some kind of, information that says how well the kids do at X school or Y school. You apply for school in November. If that data is not updated, you're going to be missing years worth of data, and it's going to be one less important piece of information that parents are going to have to inform their decision and where they send their children to school. right? So are they withholding it to keep kids locked in particular systems? I don't know. But I've said a lot. I mean, that's kind of like the preface for what we're talking about. And so I just want to get your quick reactions. And Omar, if you want to talk about like what this system looks like in Texas. We were on a call a couple of days ago with some folks in Texas that run another charter network, and I think Texas is one of the few states that still does like they're not afraid to like rank
Grades.
schools, right? I mean, everywhere else they're just like it's like a crime, right? It's demoralizing.
How can
people.
schools that give out
Crazy.
grades to kids be afraid to themselves get grades?
Totally, man. Yeah. It took me back on that call. I was like, oh, you guys still have this grading system. Oh my God, we've abandoned that years ago.
That's an op-ed, man. We should just go ahead and write that as a South Star classroom.
We don't want to hurt people's feelings. Anyways.
No, man, you literally just kind of opened up Pandora's box, because what Dr. Cole and what David don't know is that I was directly responsible with the passage of that legislation. So the legislation in Texas that created the A through F ruling to say, hey, we should rate schools, we should rate school districts, we should be transparent about them. We've got different metrics for doing that. Now, listen, like I didn't have anything to do with how they created those metrics, which I actually agree with how they created them. And our current commissioner, Mike Morath, really devised a lot of this when he was working at Dallas ISD, of which I got like a lot of really wonderful things to say about Commissioner Morath, to be honest with you, man. You know that I'll speak the truth about anybody and lay waste into anybody. I have with Hannity a lot, but Morath's pretty awesome. And when they devised that, I was directly responsible with going to the legislature and testifying and supporting the passage of that law. So I not only agree with it, like kind of like Bernie Sanders says, I didn't write the damn law, but I was involved in the damn law. All right, I was there and I testified on it. So I agree with it.
You should take that on the road. That was a very good. I like that. That was good.
It's not bad.
That's a great impression.
You're my Rodney Dangerfield. That one's not too shabby either, you know. I get no respect, you know. But the truth behind rating schools is important because it's a transparency issue. But to me, it's not just a transparency issue for our communities, for our parents, for them to make good choices. It's an accountability issue. If we're going to be running schools, me included, and I'm not doing my job as well as I should, the public should know, like, yeah, man, like Omar's school ain't doing too hot. And I'm all about it. In the state of Texas, those scores also, they have come out. Now, what has happened in this state is that they were really kind over the last, year or two because of the pandemic, because we got nailed. Everyone got nailed, and scores are not looking too hot, and that should not be surprising. But I got to give the state of Texas a lot of credit. They're like doubling down on money and supports to help us out. So for example, like our East Side campus didn't do too hot last year. Granted, we had 19 kids in the middle school. So not easy when you only have 19 students under the accountability metrics in our high school. But that was a prompt for us to be like, we have to do magnificently better by our kids. Here are the structures that we're going to put in. Here's the money that we're going to get. We're going to try to get like a massive 1-to-5 tutor to student ratio with digital tutoring going on this year to greatly elevate scores. And what I'm getting at, ladies and gentlemen, my hot take of withholding information is that it's not just, I think, incorrect in terms of withholding that information from a community for them to make choices. I think it's withholding that information that then creates an accountability measure that every single school district, every single state leader should feel in saying, we are so accountable to our students that everyone should know, and we should feel that heat on us, because that heat is an imperative in order to prompt a very direct response about what we're going to do for kids. But I think that I'm honestly in the very slim minority of saying, I want that accountability and I want that to be publicly known. I think a bunch of other people are like the Sandman at the Apollo, just trying to sweep that stuff off stage, trying to sweep
Yeah.
it underneath the rug. And I have difficulties with that because not
Yeah.
only do I think it's unethical, but that it prevents that accountability measure that I think is extremely important for people to feel.
Yeah.
Yo,
and
when you,
it's something that happens far too often in our big systems is, well, I think two things. The longer they wait to release the data, um, the less, we will be able to do with the data and analyze
Right.
the data and plan for changing the data, right? So at a certain point, the data actually becomes unusable as a data set. So if you are
right,
going to put children in front of computers for hours on end and it create this whole infrastructure and interrupt instruction, I actually happen to think that assessment is part of instruction. If you're going to mandate this thing, then follow through the entire way, right? And so I don't, I know a little bit about technology. I don't know the inner workings of the actual tech behind the assessment systems that are used for, the state testing. I know they're big, they're clunky. I will tell you that, there are other platforms that many schools use. We used the NWEA, right? Northwest Evaluation Association. It's a comprehensive assessment tool. We would set it up 3 times a year. Kids would take it in the fall, the winter, and the spring. We would publish all of the results to the community. We would push the results to teams, to grade levels, to departments, to teachers for planning purposes. And then we would track student growth over the year. But here's the point. Students took these tests in, say, I'll be easy, in May of 2022. And the state is saying they're not going to release this publicly until maybe 6 months later, right? Do you know when you take an NWEA assessment and many of the more advanced platforms, I'm going
It's
to take it
available
today.
immediately.
It's
it's
available within the
immediately.
next day. Within the
Yeah.
next day, you can do the student report to the, graphics and different configurations of looking at your data. So there's a technology question that I really have. I don't understand that, I mean, I know they have to like verify it, but it just seems laborious. But
Yeah.
that's what our big government systems tend to do. They overcomplicate stuff, right?
Well,
And now
sometimes,
it's,
sorry,
but
because
yeah,
I've been waiting to give my just my
The
opinion on this.
hot take, baby.
But
give
not
it,
even
bring
not
it.
even a hot take, but because I think y'all should have went first because y'all run schools that like there's like an insider baseball like explanation around what happens when this comes out, this, that, and the third. So I think that piece is important. My piece is coming more as a community member, right? Like as somebody who doesn't like for our listeners that have never worked in education that don't really understand what it's saying. I just want to here's what I'm hearing you say, David, is that major tests happen right after one of the biggest pandemics in our living history. It's not the Black Plague, but it was bad for us in our time. We're trying to get things back to normal. And then there's this testing data that's about to come out in the middle of a tumultuous, like messed up that word, but in the middle of like a crazy political time with a very important midterm election where one party is being targeted. Well, one party is being assumed that they're going to lose and lose pretty badly against some political constraints that have been happening, whether it is political stunts such as DeSantis sending people up to different places, or the anti-CRT type stuff, or schools have been such a strong political figure than it has been in a long time, and now mysteriously these test scores will not be available until well after this election. I would just say this, right? As somebody hearing it that way, where are the adults, man? What is happening, yo? Like any reasonable person can understand that we just came out of a pandemic that we're still in, even though Biden said that it's over. Biden said that, so I guess it's okay when he says it, but that he said was over. There's an expected drop off, but then I think there are some people that were pushing for certain things, and they were told that numbers were going to really drop, and now they are, and for some reason we can't see it. listen, man, you have to go and demand the things that you need for your people and for your children. But people that are listening to me, if you are still only dependent on our public education system as your sole tool and access point to educate your kids, you are setting them up for failure and disaster. You truly are. Like, and if you want your children to have critical thinking skills, if you want your children to be good people, if you want your children to not be a part of the scarlet letter kind of mob mentality treatment on either side of this, and this is not a political rant against liberals or against uber conservatives. This is everybody. Everybody is doing political theater. The only thing that has mattered for a long time in this country is the marketing. How can I spend this? How can this happen? Right now, Ime Udoka, the coach of the Boston Celtics, is all over every news thing for apparently having an extramarital like affair in the office, whereas Brett Favre stole $50+ million from the welfare fund that directly goes to a lot of the families and students that we're talking about. I'm not trying to get us off track. I'm just saying this as a consumer of information where all this stuff is now melded together. You more than ever have to be a critical thinker. You have to go and get information. You have to verify sources, and you have to have conversations with your children. You have to talk with your neighbors. You have to talk to your spouse, because if we continue to just wait on the internet, if we continue to wait on the zeitgeist, you are going to keep getting fed bullshit that is not meant to serve you. It is meant to push forward an agenda. I am a Black man who has watched Black people be murdered, whether it's in our communities, whether it's by police or whatever the case is. And I remember when Black Lives Matter came up as an organization, I remember having a question like, hey, I'm not sure that this organization that's called Black Lives Matter, that has no mention of Black males on their website, is really here to do us well. Well, you can't question this. You can't do this or whatever the case is. No, man. I'm really in these streets and I really care about my people. David, you are really in these schools. Omar, you are really in these schools. And people that are really doing this stuff knows that it behooves no one of note that should be protected. It behooves none of us to withhold this information. I'm sorry, I don't believe it. We have to, like, that is the bed that we made. We need to lay in that bed and let the chips fall where they may. But you have to start having a conversation with this public, or there will be whatever little bit of trust is left amongst the American people and officials of any type is very, very thin, and it is fastly and quickly and aggressively eroding. That's what I'm hearing in this crazy ass story. Like, you got the numbers, but you just like, nah, you can't have that yet. That's crazy to me, bro.
Yeah,
I got a question for you both and for our audience, because I think again, man, you're opening up like one hell of a can of worms. Let me give a bit of context, and then I've got a big question. We talked about this a ton at the Kennedy School. So, like, for our audience, full disclosure, I know that you guys mention it a whole lot, but I was honored and privileged enough to have gone to the Harvard Kennedy School for grad school. And this place is an amazing place. This is a place of public policy, and it's like over 50% are international students, and those international students become the presidents and the prime ministers of their country. Like, it's that kind of output. And the people that I graduated with are now literally writing the EPA plan for environmental protection over the next like 35 years. I got a friend working in the White House. I have friends working in certain 3-letter organizations and so forth. And the reason I bring this up is that this place was an incredibly important place of learning about the political process and the public policy process. And the greatest lesson, there's a lot of great lessons, but one of the greatest lessons that I learned, that I took away from personally, is that you've got two sides of things. You've got the public policy side. This is, what are we doing to actually support policies, procedures, and practices that are going to actually help the public? And I mean, that is David's work, and that is Dr. Charles' work. We are marred in the reality of where we've ran schools, we've started community organizations. We are now starting and have started a show built on truth, substance, and consulting to actually do substantive work. The other side of this is politics. And the politics,
Mhm.
ladies and gentlemen, is the show. It's the circus. We're
Yeah.
doing these grandstanding things in order to get attention. We're doing things like sending migrants
Yeah.
from Texas and Florida to Martha's Vineyard to gain notoriety, to gain, like, they don't care what happens to these poor people, but the show of it all is what and why they're trying to do it. So I have to ask you, gentlemen, because I think that I've gotten either extraordinarily sad or jaded or cynical, that in the advent of social media, in the advent of children hoping to become an influencer, which is just like, what the hell is an influencer? Like, I know what an influencer is because I'm not an idiot, but I'm like, this is a real thing. You've got someone who has 500,000 followers on Instagram, and the power of what they say and can do rocks the world. The power of someone like Brett Favre, that scumbag who literally like can steal from the poor in order to give to the rich, not being discussed in public media because he's an influencer, he's a football star, we don't want to taint the all-American image, is such political theater. Have we in the last 20 years, this is the question, gentlemen, gotten so far into the depths of social media realities, your representative out in the like digital world as opposed to your true self, the political theater of catching likes and memes and news stories and social media broadcasts, and we've gotten so far in the last 20 years that is now what people are so focused on, and this is why good shit doesn't get accomplished, because those of us that are doing the substantive work are in the minority? It's a legit question, and I want to get your take on that.
Well, I'm gonna give David. I'm about to give David the option, because David, my answer
That was
is
not
gonna
part
go
of the
off.
deal. Okay.
My option is my answer is about to go off the rails. So do you want to go before or after?
I want to go now. I want to go right now.
Yeah, you do that. There you go.
And then I'm going to go to, and then I'm going to bed. All right. Yeah, I mean, so what you are bringing up, Omar, is essentially the separation of reality, right? And it could be reality of what's happening for children in a community or in a city or in a school, versus the world that we have created, online, right? Social media, and not just online, but now like social media platforms, and with every day, that comes, the separation between what might or might not be real, with what's happening with children in our schools, can sometimes look very different than the narrative on social media. And yeah, of course, that's where people get their news. I mean, we're part of it. We're on this show. I don't think we spread untruths. I think we try and be honest and upfront. We are not experts, but we're definitely part of it, feeding the cycle. And so yeah, I think there's clearly a separation when we talk about the difference between the political side of things, but then what's the actual practical side of things. So the practical side of things is like, I as a parent just looked up in my son's school district portal under his account, and I didn't know, and I just looked it up. They've already posted his 2022 state test results. They're in there. You can go and see them, right? So they've got him from the big system. They put him into the parent portal, and boom. I'm concerned about that as a parent, right? That's practical. I think if you are a parent and you're watching this, sure, there's a whole other world that exists out there, social media, news cycles, but we care about our children. So what you can do is like ask your teacher, ask your school for these standardized test scores, and then understand like what they give to you. Do they give you a report card? Do they give you other forms of information that can help to inform you, around whether or not the school is serving the needs of your child, right? And so Definitely. I think that's on the real part. On the, in the political world, in the spin world, in the social media world, um, I agree with you. And I think the question back to both of you, you don't have to answer, but like if you're a Democrat, politician in a Democratic state, you know what the criticisms are, right? And so part of it is doing the work, and part of it is understanding the chatter that's going to happen around it. And I'm like, did they not like test messaging around what do people think if Democrats in blue states withhold student test scores in states and districts that have been closed the longest until after the midterm election? Let's test that in the poll, right? I don't think that, I mean, they probably should have. I could have saved them a lot of money. And so that's where we are on that. So that's my response, and hand it over to Dr. Cole.
Well,
Yeah, man. I can't.
are you just ready for me to go crazy? I'm listen. To ask your question, I want to make sure. Yeah, you were muted, but unmute yourself. Ask your question one more time, Omar, because I want to make sure I answer it and not just go off.
Yes, absolutely. And before I do that, give me just 2 seconds to say, Mr. Conrad, always great to hear from you. We actually talked last show about my desire to dissolve state-by-state testing and have a nationalized testing system, whether it's all Common Core, whether it's all NWEA. I completely agree with you that we should have a nationalized data system to basically understand if a student from Michigan, California, and Texas moves, where are they at? Because it's so fragmented, we have no idea. And it's just so helpful for like every person in education, even at the collegiate level, to know that. 2, Doc, my question is this: in the last 20 years, with the advent of social media, with the advent of likes, with the advent of this representative self in the stratosphere, have we gotten so out of touch with the actual substantive work that now the majority of people are only focusing on the political theater because the perception becomes the reality? And those of us that are doing the substantive work are in the minority? Or have I misinterpreted what's been going on in the last 20 years?
Oh, this is going to be fun. So the way that I would answer that, is yes and no. Yes, we have fallen into this very hyper surface level of analysis around everything. What do our emotions tell us, and how do we want to respond? And we can't just have a regular response to stuff. Everything is hyperbolic. Everything has to be the most. It's the most egregious. And here's the thing: if everything is an emergency, then nothing is. So like, these are test scores that babies have had, like that we need to come out so people can know this ain't nuclear codes. This ain't like military secrets that's going to lead to like the bombing or the death of X, Y, and Z. This is actually one of the bare minimum ways of us having some type of accountability around where education is or whatever the case is. That's one. Where I say no, though, goes back to one of my favorite books. And it's not something like Malcolm X is one of my favorite books. I love reading really deep people, you know what I'm saying? Like that is, this isn't Kant though, right? My favorite book and favorite story is The Emperor's New Clothes. It's some shit that I read when I was 5 years old. And I am seeing this principle play out more and more and more. Everybody is naked, David and Omar. And this is what I mean. Like, but they're telling each other, we got the finest gold garb on. We are the best country. We're the best in this. We are more woke. We care about this American values. And again, I am not targeting one party or another. I am not targeting the far left or the far right. I think both fars is crazy. I think that both fars is a hard place to live and function in. I think both fars is an ideal, is an ideal that we have told people they have to subscribe to that if you are poor white person in West Virginia, you have to be this raging conservative. And if you are a Birkenstock loving hippie on the left coast, then you have to be the most liberal of all time. And nobody's having real conversations. Nobody, we are so divorced from reality. And so I say yes to answer the question that we have really lost some more substance. But the reason why I say no is this has always been happening. Ignorance has always been bliss. And I think that right now, everybody is putting on a show for politics. Everybody is putting on a show because they want to be viewed a certain type of way. And I think that nobody is actually telling the truth. I think that what matters is not truth, it is marketing. I think marketing is the most important currency that we have at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think it's very, very interesting. So, that's why I said if you want to go, first or second, David, because I know I kind of went off the rails a little bit, and I don't know if Omar heard all of that, but I will just say, like, so yes, Omar, I answered your question.
Oh no, I heard the whole thing, man.
Yeah,
I was here.
And that's where I think we are. And I think that parents, you have to fight this temptation. You have to fight this level of mental and like deep thinking morose that like people are in right now. And you actually have to think about things, not what does my clan look like? What is my friend saying? What is my political party saying? Just think about things for a moment. And when you start asking simple questions and those simple questions start to get, pared down, or they start to call you things or whatever, I think that's when you starting to crack on somebody's surface, man. But I think it's the emperor's new clothes. And
I agree with you.
I'm gonna just end on this, Omar. I know I was long.
No, go ahead, Ben.
I was definitely trying to stretch, but I'll close it here. The only people that's telling the truth, ironically, is them kids. And right now, them kids scores. That will tell us where we are.
Yeah.
It will tell us what the work is. And just like in the book, the only ones that you could count on to tell the truth was those kids that walked up to that king and said, "Hey, bro, you naked as hell. We are naked right now." And we all need to cover up, man. And it's the thing. Nobody is perfect. Nobody expects you to be perfect. But if you keep playing a perfect person on TV, everybody's card will eventually get pulled. So, why don't we just all recognize that we got egg on our face, recognize that we can be better, recognize that there's a new standard, and we can all have a little bit more grace for each other and actually build the world that our kids can benefit from. I'm done.
But this is no, man, look, I'm with you, but this is my worry. And I want to kind of tie this in and ask you guys another question that's probably going to get you guys heated up again.
David was not heated
up. There are a ton of, David, when he is heated, doesn't even look heated. He's the beard of knowledge. The man is temperate at all times. I would love for this man to be running any organization or any school. It's like, this man can do no wrong in my vision. Yeah. But for our listeners, like, here's my difficulty in Doc. Here's where I'm at. And this is why I asked this question is that, like, if all these people are putting such a concerted effort into the politics, then does that take away from the overall amount of people that are putting in the substantive work to actually solve the problem? But now here's part B. Those of us that are putting in the substantive work, the teachers, the principals, the assistant principals, the educators, the board members, even all of my friends in the public policy sphere who are not in elected office that are working their asses off, is our work compromised because the highest echelons, your governors, your state commissioners, your presidential hopefuls, your superintendents that are elected folks, are playing the representative game, are playing the politics game, are playing the political theater, that then their actions of playing political theater deeply damage our ability to actually do the work. And it ties into the article today because you have a guy in California who's trying to run for the presidency of the United States. So not only is he withholding these test scores in order to ensure that the Democrats do not get as bad as a shellacking as they will in the midterms. And by the way, there's a lot of talk about abortion being a key pivotal issue during the midterms that may actually result in Democrats
Right. In
not
another
only
flip.
not losing,
In a flip.
but
Yeah.
in fact doing better. And now what they're doing is like, we can't give the right any political fodder in order for them to win this thing. And Governor Newsom can't give the United States any fodder to attack him as he's running for politics. And look, I get the political component of all that, but the reality is you're doing it for political theater, and it's absolutely compromising the shit out of us and educators and the people to actually do something substantive with it. So I asked both of you, how far does this have to go to where their political theater affects our ability to be successful in actually implementing solutions?
It affects it now. It affects it now. You don't matter. Like, you just don't. Like, I just like the people have made decisions behind.
Wait, you don't matter like me? Like, I ain't shit like that.
None
that
of
part,
us.
like that boys in the hood, like you ain't shit.
I think it's that. Let me tell you what I think it is. I think that it is whatever is politically prudent is what will reign ahead. And like, so those test scores be damned, those kids be damned. I mean, there are still kids missing in Oakland as far as like from when COVID was, and we just lost kids, right? Like, if we really cared about these results, and if we really cared about achievement, we would have been did something about what's going on. But what it is you just can't have as much of a drop. Don't nobody bat an eye when they see that 25% or 30% of black kids is reading at grade level. Nobody bats an eye, because you know why? Because most people didn't expect them to do well anyway. But when them numbers dip under 50 for white kids or whatever, it depends. Are those white kids poor, or are those white kids senators' kids? It's only a problem when them white kids are senators' kids. And guess what? They're going to say everything that they need to say in front of you. They're going to be people that say that they hate charter schools and privatization, this and that and the third. And then you go down their damn family tree like Elizabeth Warren, and it's like, oh, your kid was in private school. Yet and still you grandstanding on this other thing. And I like you. This is the thing. Be an adult and be a critical thinker. I can like people and not agree with every single thing that's happening. I love Tony Thurmond, our California state superintendent. I love him. I love him like a brother. Like, he is actually like a brother to me. Like, I know his kids. And we disagree on some education policy stuff. We are adults, man. We're adults. I don't have to agree with every single thing that Omar or David says for me to respect and love them. And if we can't do that as a country of adults, man, this thing is going to get way worse before it gets better. So I heard what you said, Omar. I'm off the rails. I think David has a much more coherent answer for you. You have made my blood boil.
Oh, man. No, I think Omar's speaking from the voice of a practitioner, right?
Right.
Somebody who's responsible for administering these assessments and for like educating children, right? And so when you have the powers that be in the political world from the non-practitioner side, you now potentially allegedly using the release of public information that is probably less than stellar. We know that. It does a couple of things. It does one thing. I believe, and this is the really bad part. It erodes the public's trust in like any kind of like indicator that demonstrates like how children are doing. It erodes the value of measuring whether or not children are learning in schools.
Right.
And then you start to turn to, well, okay, so let's not talk about reading or writing. But we have, hired X number of new mental health therapists. Great. How are you measuring whether or not that's effective? Okay, well, we're delivering food to people's homes. We've delivered X number of meals and we're feeding people. Okay, not really sure that's the role that we envisioned for the public school. Right. Now they're going into all these different like political realms. I feel like, we need to dial it back, and it calls into question, what is the fundamental purpose of the public school? And I think when most people think about school, they think about education. And when they think about education, the fundamentals of education are like reading, writing, and mathematics. Nothing happens without that. And so my concern is that, and actually I do believe there's some, political tomfoolery happening. I think in California, probably in New York. It's a bad look. It's not going to work out well for them. I think, it's what we know when we work with children is that routines matter, timelines matter, schedules matter. And so when we're talking about releasing data, at an annual cycle, the timeline matters, and they're off the timeline now, and it's really disrupted. It's been very disruptive, and I feel like it's going to further erode the value that we put into any kind of way to measure whether or not students are actually learning in school. And that is really problematic for the children that we talk about on this show, Black and brown kids, right? Especially coming out of the pandemic. You're going to wait for next year's data set to measure learning loss for the last 3 years or 4 years, right? And what are you going to do about it? So the data is the data, right? Period. Bad, good, medium, neutral. That's not the important piece. The important piece is us holding our public systems, district schools, charter schools accountable for what now are you going to do about it and what resources do you need. But when you ignore that, there's no action plans, there's no strategy, and kids continue to fall further and further behind. And I think that calls into question, this data really is public information. And so I'm glad the people at EdSource filed a Freedom of Information Act request to the state government of California. It got rejected, but they're trying. So I appreciate when journalism steps in. I know many journalists are very sensitive about this. They're like, I'm a journalist. Yeah, but you know what? When you sent that Freedom of Information Act request into the government, some people see that as advocacy, and that's okay, right? You're advocating for the release of public information that can help people. And so that's what's happening in California. I don't know what the end result will be, but yeah.
But we lost David. David was talking too much real stuff, and then the people came and got him, Omar. The people
dark side, man. I know, man.
Yeah, they got me.
Man, they got him. They got him, baby.
As a former teacher and a former head of school and systems leader, I think what's happening with the delay of the release of this information is totally unethical. So.
Well, listen, man. But as a people, and just to put a button on my answer to Omar, we gotta want better. Listen, yo, we are more up in arms and demanding of what celebrity is having an affair with who than actually public data around how children are learning in this country. Really, I mean, you need a willing arguer, you need a willing audience to pull off that type of heist.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I don't want to let us off the hook. I don't want to let myself off the hook on this. And it's not, I don't want these scores for salacious reasons. I want this so we can do what Omar said, so practitioners can get to work and figure out how to build up this chasm. The people are going to do what the people are going to do. They're going to be political battles regardless if this information is good or bad. So we might as well just live in truth and move forward and
live in truth. That's it. Live in truth. Live in truth. That's it. Just put it out there, and that's our starting point. That's where we're working.
Omar, you asked a good question. Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, man. And what I was gonna kind of put an exclamation mark on something that our audience said and Will Conrad said. Thanks for always joining us, man.
I know, man. Thank you, brother. And Mr. Mama Toya's in here too now.
Indeed, man.
Yes.
We got our whole family, man. And I want to accentuate something and say that there's two things here. One, Will, you're absolutely right about individual student data. So the test scores that come from the state, they're not as detailed and involved to create a definitive individualized student plan. That's why we use iReady. That's why we use NWEAA, because it not only provides us with, hey, this student actually, the state data is just going to tell me that this 6th grade student didn't pass the 6th grade exam. That's it. That's not as usable data as this student is actually at the second grade reading level, and here's all the things that we need to do to raise them up. So I want to punch that statement, and as a practitioner, tell you I understand that. What we are saying, and I think what the doc just emphasized and David really emphasized, is that there's a huge difference between those of us who are practitioners who are extremely responsible and are accountable and are using the data internally to be like, oh my God, we've got a lot of work to do, including myself right now with our Eastside campus being like, oh my God, we have a lot of work to do. Like our flagship campus still killing it, like 4 or 5 years of gains in a year. It's amazing, but I had a 7-year head start, but I'm accepting of the fact that like, oh man, our new campus ain't doing too well. What I'm worried about, Will Conrad, are the superintendents and the people that are not as responsible as David, Dr. Cole, and I, who are just saying, yeah, this ain't good. Why don't we just bury this underneath the rug and not actually look at this and not actually hold ourselves accountable and not make definitive plans to make a change in children's lives? And what I'm saying is that in withholding the state information, it withholds the power to hold those people accountable. And sadly, that's the majority of the people who I have seen in education who would rather sweep this under the rug than be held accountable. And sadly, you need that level of embarrassment and that level of knowledge amongst parents and community members to make those phone calls and be like, yo, you're doing what? Oh man. And that pressure is sadly the necessary ingredient for them to do the right thing. Does that suck? Absolutely. Is that something that I wish didn't have to happen? Of course. But as Doc will probably chime in and say, it's the necessary elixir for them to do the right thing.
I mean, and it's sad that we got to be there. Oh, go ahead, David. Go ahead.
So this reminds me of one of the calls that we were on earlier this week, Charles. You know, Omar's talking about like accountability, right? Top-down accountability. And absolutely, that's, you know, that's your job. Your job as a school leader, as a teacher, you should be held accountable. And in so many of our states, like they've totally blown up any kind of accountability. So I praise Texas for maintaining the report card system. But what we also know is that when schools and districts are doing well within an accountability system, when children are learning and growing and achieving, then you start to create that other accountability system that comes from the ground level, right? You start to have families come to you and say, hey, we hear good things about your school, and they hear good stories from family members and community members. And then you have community that's there for a particular reason, because you are a performing organization, you support children, it's a safe environment. And so now you're operating off of both the external accountability that the states have in place or the federal government has in place. You're doing well there, and that creates a natural accountability and draw from community. And that's like the sweet spot for a school, for a charter network, or for a district, right? That's like threading the needle between those two things. But you can't do either of them without the data. So,
man, it's now we cooking with grease. I wish we had another hour. I got to get back on these reports, but I'll go into my final thought and let you close us out, David. I would just say this. One, I want to answer Miss Toya's question. She said, my question is, how are we supposed to explain this to parents so they understand? Tell them the truth. Tell them exactly what happened, and then give them marching orders on what they need to do. So they might not have that data, but they can get the data around what reading level their kid is on and compared to what grade they're in. Ask them what math level they're on. Like figure out like what their goal, you can figure out what your kids' teachers' goals are for this semester. You can ask very clearly, and you can ask where your kid stands in that. And as you take these questions, have a notebook and have a pen with you. And if they can't answer these questions for you, then you can escalate it up to their boss, because they're supposed to know this stuff. This is a part of it. If somebody came to Omar and said, "Hey man, I went, my kids go to your schools, but I asked their teacher about the reading level, like their English teacher, and like I've been getting a runaround, or they didn't know." And then I asked them about their goals for the semester, like what they're teaching, and they didn't have an answer for me. I feel like that would be something disturbing for him to hear. And he might not be that person's direct supervisor, but he damn well is going to get it to whoever needs to have it.
Yep.
So they can do that in lieu. I think in my final thought on this, to get out of Ms. Toya's question, but my final thought around this conversation, I tried to like my Palo Santo and it's out. Like I have to like buy more Palo Santo. I needed to calm down today. But I will just say, I don't know what else needs to happen for you to know that you're on your own. Like, I don't know what else needs to be. Like, I don't know how many times somebody gets to piss on your leg and tell you that it's raining. You know what I'm saying? Before you're like, check this out, yo. One more time and we're going to fight. I think that this country is coming to a moment, any side, however you feel, everybody's mad. Everybody feel like their version of democracy is at the end of its rope. Everybody is like, the steam level got like one more inch to go before the top pops. And we got to figure this stuff out as a country, man. We got to figure this stuff out as a people that says that they are civilized. We can't have the lead in on like major television news be adults having affairs when like there's countries that are getting invaded right now. All you book warriors, all you people that said, if I lived during slavery, I wouldn't have whoop, or if I lived in the 60s, I would have did this, or they, you know, the British couldn't have colonized while we was, colonization is happening right now. Right now. And on Twitter, what's trending ain't got nothing to do with that. And so, but that is our public education system is either going to help us be better, well-rounded people, or it's going to continue to make us dumber, to make us less caring, to make us less empathetic, and to make us better actors who never say what they actually really feel. Since life is marketing, they always happen to say the right shit, even though the right shit never happens. So that's my final thought, and I'll pass it to you, brother.
Damn, that was hot. That was hot. David, do you want to close out the show? I've got a quick final thought.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me go ahead and give a quick one, and then it's gonna be tough to follow that shit. So I'll act as a buffer. Yeah, man.
Thank you, buffer. Take one for the team.
I will, man. Look, man, the doc is right, and I think what my biggest worry and my final take on the show is about the show, meaning how many people have gotten into the job of not doing the substantive work, but being on the microphone. Now, I applaud the fact that the three of us are on the microphone, because I will just be self-indulgent and say the three of us should be on the microphone. We are the ones who should be in front of the public having these conversations, because we've done the substantive work and we're on the mic to share truth. We're not on the mic to self-aggrandize ourselves or for an alternate political motivation. And I am getting very upset and very disheartened by the fact that where did it come to the point where governors or political campaigners or wannabes or influencers or all these jackasses, their whole life, the only thing they got is the microphone. And I want us all to think very deeply about this. When all you've got is the microphone, like the three of us got jobs. You take away the mic from me, or when someone's like, hey, Omar, you ran this political contest and you lost. And it's like, yeah, cool, because that's not my job. That's not my life. I have my job. I have my life. But when all you've got is the microphone, what will you do? And what extent will you go to? And what lies will you tell in order to keep that microphone? Because that's all you've got. And that's what's worrying me about this situation, is that when these people have the power to then punish us, punish the public, and complicate our lives who are actually doing the substantive work, because all they have is the microphone, how does that affect our lives? How does that affect the lives of children? And when are we going to start reclaiming the mic and telling the truth? Because I'm about to go Sandman, sweep their monkey asses off this stage, as The Rock would say. Beat your monkey ass, make you famous. I love how The Rock said that, man. I say it all the time. And sweep these clowns off the damn stage, claim the mic, and share the truth. That's my final thought.
And take us home, David.
Wow,
Good show, man.
All right.
Like
Yeah.
it took us a moment to get in it, but once we got in there, baby, we was a locomotive. We was rocking.
Yeah, I mean, I think two things. The first thing coming from the lens of the or three things coming from the lens of the parent, right? Like what are the implications here from a parent, right? And so if you are a parent, you know, ask your school, ask your teachers for, you know, different pieces, especially at this beginning part of the school year, you know, ask them for information about student progress. So ask them for the 2022 standardized test scores. Do they have them? Ask them for any other kind of assessment data that they may have administered in the first couple of weeks of school. Request a meeting to have a conversation about your student, your child, and how they can best support them and set goals. Any other information. So for individual parents, this is your right. Talking about freedom of information, and schools should provide this, right? And so that's like from the end of the parent, from the end of the practitioner, mainly like thinking about teachers now that may not know so well in certain cases, especially younger teachers. You know, ask your principals, ask your districts to provide this data. So if you're a teacher and you're teaching in a classroom today and you haven't seen your standardized test scores for the kids that you're working with now, that's a problem. So I think from the end of the practitioner, that's important because you need that for planning, planning purposes, et cetera, et cetera. From the political end of things, I mean, I think it's simple. I hope our politicians decide to, you know, if they are going to become involved and engaged in issues around education, you know, do better, support what educators do, support what school leaders do, demand accountability for what's happening in our schools. I think, you know, if it's ridiculous to think that data in California that should have been released probably more than a month ago may not be released until November. And I think the simple thing I have to say on that is like, at the end of the day, if it's not good, you know, it's a pig. You put lipstick on a pig. What is it? It's still a pig,
Man.
right? And that's what it is, and that's okay. But just like put it out, let's look at it, let's go over it, and then let's learn from it, and then let's move on. But I think, you know, withholding it for any kind of political gain or political theater is really kind of like next level. I don't think I've ever seen that before, and I think it's really hurtful to children. I think it's hurtful to education as a whole. I think it's hurtful to teachers. I think it will continue to further the, you know, erosion or eroding of you know, what people think about public education, and that's a shame. And that's on those leaders, right? That's not on teachers. It's not on principals. That's on our politicals. So that's the message to them.
Man, this has been an incredible show, man. I just great production there, brother David. I'm into this conversation. We will see you all. Well, I actually have a staff retreat next Friday, but I'm gonna try to make it. We're not doing it local. So, but we will see you all same bat time, same bat station. That's David. That's Omar. He is not in a bunker. He is okay. He is at his friend's house. He's fine. He does not need you to send the cavalry because we were coming. And I am Charles. I love you, brothers. I love you, audience. We will see y'all next time. Peace.